All right, we feel good? All right, so if you don't know who I am, I'm Ross Garner, and then that's Chris Kerr if you do not know Chris Kerr. So this is our Spring Sports Performance Symposium. Okay, so goals for today, we're setting our coaches up for success. So we're going to discuss the following. We're going to briefly review our 4 coactive model, which is something we talked about a lot on the last symposium, but I just want to briefly touch on that to kind of set the stage for what we're talking about today. We'll go energy system development, and then how can we help you specifically, and then or take a little break if we need, and then Coach Kerr is going to talk after that. All right, so our 4 coactive model. So what we have here is our 4 things that really impact our player health. Okay, so there's tactical, there is technical, there's psychological, and then there is physical. Okay, so all these things again are encompassing player health. Now, as a coach, the 2 big things for you are going to be tactical and technical preparation. So with tactical, it just means what your sport actually is, where there's the strategy and the skills and what we need there as we're playing. Our technical preparation are the actual skill sets, so it's those little details, whether it's specifically how we're holding a gun or the different stance we have in wrestling, the different specific moves there. Psychological preparation is really everybody's role, just making sure the mental health is dialed in of our athletes. And then the physical preparation, and that is just strength and conditioning's role. And I would argue that with strength and conditioning, we have a little bit of help with our tactical and technical preparation, but again, the coaches, you're the expert on it, so that's where your lead is. And then you guys as coaches also have a little bit of help there in the physical preparation for your athletes. Okay, so like I've already said, technical preparation, so the skills required to play your sport. Okay, this is just the entry level, what is required to do, what is required to play your sport. Highly skilled teams need less time here, more time in the tactical world. So if you've got a really experienced team that knows what they're doing in your sport, we don't need to spend a ton of time here. Yes, you do need to still work on the fundamentals of what you're doing, but we don't need to spend 8 hours, 10 hours a week on the technical. Instead, we can take our time and go on our tactical. And with this, spatial awareness and vision is part of our technical preparation because context is key. So what I mean by that is when you are performing a skill in a specific environment, okay, the only time that I'm going to be able to make the right decision is within the right context. So if I'm skeet shooting and I've got a clay coming across or what have you, it's not going to be the same if I'm shooting the target standing still, right? So I can see it, but if I'm not getting the same environment and whatnot that I'm seeing in the sport, it's not going to apply or transfer very well. Same thing if I have my guys in wrestling, if I'm just working on a shot by themselves, okay, if they're not on another person that's close to them, that vision, that awareness isn't going to transfer as well working on the skill. Again, there's a place for it, but we got to make sure that we're getting the right context when we're doing that. Okay, and then tactical preparation. So how well does a player understand the sport? So this is our on-field decision making and then our game strategy. And again, it just goes back, do you understand the sport? Are you making the right decisions with all the technical skills that you have? And then coaches often link failures and on-field execution to physical attributes instead of tactical knowledge. So this can kind of go either way in terms of whether the athlete failed because they lack the physical attributes, or is it because they made a tactical decision that got them caught. So for wrestling, for example, a guy's running a specific move, but then the opponent caught him in it and he's pinned, right? He just made the wrong decision potentially at the wrong time, where their opponent made the right decision at the right time. It's not a physical limitation, it's just he made the wrong decision there and he got caught. Okay, and then like we said, with the vision is our OODA loop. Okay, so OODA is observe, orient, decide, and act. Okay, so this is everything and just we do in a split second when we make decisions. So with the OODA loop, we're going to observe. So in other words, I'm going to see what is happening. Okay, I'm going to orient. So with that, I'm going to use my previous experience of what I've seen before. Okay, or any new information that I'm seeing right now. All right, so if I've got a clay coming across, I'm going to notice the angle that it's going at, the speed that it's going at. Okay, so I'm going to orient to that. I'm then going to decide. So I'm going to decide when I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to decide when I'm going to take a shot or things of that nature. And then I'm going to act. Okay, and then once I act, that loop goes over and over again. So it's just right here, right now on our decision making. Okay.
I'm a rifle shooter, so I don't shoot things.
Okay, 10-4.
My target's still.
I love it. That's even better. That's even better.
Okay, no, so, I'm sorry, can you go back?
Yes, sir, Coach.
So, are you starting with observation?
Yes, sir. Starting with observe, and then we end with act.
Okay.
And then for context, Coach, I would argue this is for wrestling, there are times obviously where there's vision involved, but I would argue there's plenty of times where it's more of a feel versus a vision piece. It can kind of go either way. So take that for what it's worth. Okay, so then our psychological preparation, all right? So this is our spiritual, emotional, and our cognitive. So with spiritual, this is our individual's identity and purpose in life. So the big three things here are meaning, connection, and control, okay, within your team environment. So meaning, just meaning, hey, why am I here? Why am I on the team? That type of deal. Connection being, what is my role on the team? And then control being, how can I contribute to the team? So in order for us, as teammates or on a team, in order for us to be really spiritually centered, okay, they need to have those things. They need to have a role in the team. They need to have a reason why they're there. And they need to be able to contribute somehow, some way. It's really hard to be on a big team if you don't feel like you're contributing somehow. So then our emotional. So emotion is an interpretation or perception of a particular situation. So how I react to a situation is going to be different than how you react to a situation. And managing emotions is a prerequisite for high performance. So anybody that's a high performer, they're never going to get too high, they're never going to get too low. They're going to stay right in the middle. They may miss their target, but they're still dialed in. They're not going to get mad or angry or what have you. Hey, Coach? Good. And then cognitive. Okay, so our ability to focus and process or learn. Okay, so the body and the brain are one unit. Okay, and this is a big thing for stress is stress. Okay, whether it's mental stress, whether it's physical stress, it's still going to impact the body in the same way. Okay, even though it may not seem like it, it's still going to impact the body in the same way. And then for the record, I'll send out this PowerPoint too, just so we're not worried about that. Okay, then our last thing here with the 4 active model is our physical preparation, and again, this is just our kind of main role. So energy system performance, that's what I'm going to talk about next, and that's going to be our focus for the day. Neuromuscular performance, which is just different phases of the muscle contraction, and then motor system performance or outputs, which is just simply speed, power, strength, endurance, which are all those things that coaches, when they talk to us, that's what they refer to. Speed, power, strength, endurance. Okay, and then I won't talk through this, but this is just a good graph to have of when coaches ask, are our players strong enough? We can ask these different questions, and essentially it leads to, all right, they are strong enough, it's either or they're not. If they're not strong enough, let's get them stronger. If they are strong enough, then they need to work on their technique and their tactical ability. But we'll talk, if you've got a specific question there, we can get after that. Same thing for fast enough or power, same idea. They are powerful enough in the weight room or out on the field or whatever, then the problem is going to be their game sense or technique. All right, Coach, you came in at a good time because this is the new stuff. Okay, so energy system development, okay? When I say energy system development, a lot of times you're probably going to say in your head conditioning, which yes and no, but this is essentially what our 3 energy systems are that we're going to use in sport or just in life, okay? There's 3 main energy systems. We have our ATP, okay? And for all these things, we have a time frame here, and they're just a loose time frame. It can be plus or minus these times, but it just gives you a good idea of what is the predominant energy system during these time frames, okay? All 3 are active at any time. There's just one's more predominant than the other. So ATP, we're going to go up to 15 seconds. So energy is coming from ATP, which is something that's stored in the muscle, okay? No oxygen is required for these movements. Okay, it's all explosive, and it's max effort stuff or just short burst movements, okay? Glycolytic, so this is our middle ground. These are our movements where when we do these, there's a lot of burn, it's painful, it's no fun, okay? And these are when we're going for 15 to 60 seconds. So that 60-second number can get pushed out a little bit further. But energy comes from glucose that is circulating in the blood and stored in muscles and liver. So glucose comes from carbohydrates, okay? Now, athletes need this. So there's some athletes that have come in and they ask about doing like a keto diet where you're no longer eating carbs. Well, if you're in an intense sport especially where we're in this middle ground, you got to have carbs, at least in my opinion. You got to have it. And so make sure that your athletes, particularly if you're in high intense sports such as wrestling, that we're getting enough carbs in order for us to recover, which can kind of be a battle due to weight management, but nevertheless. And then this glycolytic zone is pretty much going to happen during sustained high intensity movements. Okay, so then our last one is aerobic. So this is when we go to 1 to 2 minutes or more. Okay, and this is just simply energy is coming from our oxygen. So in other words, when we breathe in, right? And then these are just sustained low intensity movements. Okay, feel good there? Okay, and then this is just our pyramid of how they build up. Okay, so aerobic is always the foundation of everything. If we don't have a good aerobic base, then we can't perform at a high level. We can't recover between stuff. Our heart rate sits super high. Glycolytic's right in the middle, okay, and then ATP is at the top. Predominantly in the weight room, we're impacting ATP. Now, we can work on all three of those energy systems in different ways, but for the most part, when we talk about speed, power, strength, and whatnot, we're talking about ATP. We're talking about that output there, okay? But again, there's different ways that, yes, we can work on glycolytic, and yes, we can work on aerobic. Now, something, and we'll talk about this in a bit, if your athletes, if their resting heart rate is over 60 beats a minute, and I'm kind of getting into it a little bit, but if it's over 60 beats a minute, they really need to work on their aerobic base because their cardiovascular health isn't the best. And if you're sitting above that, then you're working harder than you need to versus just sitting there nice and relaxed. Okay, so that, and we'll talk about there in a little bit. But again, if they're sitting above 60, they need to go do some long duration aerobic stuff to get that cardiovascular health up. All right, so when we think about energy system development, we got to think about what are our sports demands. Okay, so single bout efforts. All right, this can be archery, disc golf, shooting sports. In other words, you just have one intense thing, and then we're done. We get to relax. Okay, intermittent efforts, and that's that glycolytic zone. So these are our field and court sports. So a basketball, soccer, that kind of stuff. Racquetball, ultimate frisbee, taekwondo, wrestling, right in that middle ground. In any of these sports, just think it's burning a lot. I got to go really hard for a long period of time. And then long duration efforts, aerobic. Okay, so crew, triathlon, figure skating, cycling. Now, for any of these, like for those middle ground sports, you could argue they can kind of go either way between the middle ground and aerobic, right? But there's going to be certain, for most of the phases of those sports, they're going to be sitting in that middle ground. So it's really important that any of those sports in the middle ground have a great aerobic base, but at the same time, also have a great speed, power, strength levels at the top with ATP, those max efforts. Yes?
If your rifle sport makes you go into a position for 2 hours.
Yep.
There's 3 positions, but
yep.
2 hours to complete it, that's kind of slow and static.
Right, yeah, and I would argue between your shooting sports, any of those sports up top, they need to also have a really good aerobic base. They don't really need to bother with the middle ground. I mean, like you're saying, you're in that position for 2 hours, right? That's definitely going to be aerobic, and that's also going to be in like an isometric position. So in other words, just holding a position forever, right? But yes, that would be in that aerobic category, like you're saying. So you're on it. You got it. Yes, sir, Coach.
Glycolytic is, I'm ancient. I've been
You're good.
for a long time since I've been in school. Is that the same as what I would consider anaerobic?
Yes, so anaerobics is a broad category of not needing oxygen. So the anaerobic would be that glycolytic or the ATP. Either one of those two. All I'm doing there, Coach, is I'm just more specific. That's all. Does that make sense? Okay. Because now another term for ATP is anaerobic alactate, but depending on who you are, you can call it 50 different things. So I just used ATP to make it simple, and then glycolytic there for that middle ground. Good questions? Anybody? Okay, I'm not gonna read through the chart here, but this is a work to rest ratio chart for each energy system. And like I said, I'm going to send you this PowerPoint, so you'll also have this chart. You can also email me if you'd like it. It gives you the work to rest ratios for, let's say, conditioning or things like that, or whatever your goals are, and with your sport. And we're going to talk about them here. But again, email me and I'll get you this chart. So here's some practical max output examples, so our ATP stuff, okay? So for max, if I'm trying to work on these things, so max speed, max effort, in other words, our max output, all right? Whether it's sprinting, skating, biking, throwing, lifting, okay? You're gonna go with a 1 to 10 work rest. Basically, you're gonna do something for a short period of time and you're just gonna take a long rest, all right? 1 to 10 doesn't really need to be specific, but just think if I go for 5 seconds, I need to rest at least 50, or really 30 seconds is kind of my opinion. It doesn't necessarily need to be 50, but just add a 0 to whatever number you do. That's a good way to look at it. Okay, so you may not need to rest this long. Like I said, 30 seconds at least. So if, let's say you sprint for 2 to 6 seconds, you're going to need to rest for 20 to 60, and then we can repeat. Okay, so the key here is that your heart rate's going to spike, which is fine, but we want the athletes to recover between reps if you want it to be a max output workout or whatever you're doing, okay? Because if I'm not recovered between my bouts, then it's going to end up being capacity work or something in that middle ground. So if my heart rate's not back down, let's say like 120 or 130, then all I'm doing is jacking up my heart rate more and more if I'm not recovered all the way. So some of your athletes are going to recover faster than others, especially at the beginning of the year, and that's kind of getting into the weeds. So when we say those 1 to 10, that's just a general rule of thumb, right? Some athletes may need to rest longer, some could rest less, okay? But it just gives you a good framework there. Now, if our goal is endurance or capacity in those max efforts, then we're same deals. Now we're going to go we can go 1 to 3 to 4 work rests. So let's say I went max effort on an assault bike for something for 10 seconds. Then we're going to rest for 30 to 40 or just slowly pedal, okay? And then we'll go full speed for 10 seconds again. So again, our heart rate's going to spike, but then our athletes, you may have incomplete recovery between reps. With this stuff, you're going to have incomplete recovery, okay? But the goal is capacity, it's endurance. It's not the max output, right? All it is I want to build my endurance to handle more volume of the max speed. Okay? Does that make sense? Feel good, Coach?
Yeah, I'm following you. I'm just curious. I know in my old textbooks, I remember seeing that every sport has an element of a percentage of what would be considered ATP slash
Glycogen, glycolytic.
Glycolytic and aerobic.
Yep.
Like for example, I'll use coach's sport, the racquetball. That would be, I'm sure, more aerobic in nature with the explosiveness being glycolytic.
Right.
But is there a way in which we can determine, are there any updates as to what the percentage breakdown of what energy system would be predominant?
Yeah. So I don't have a number off the top of my head for that. But we could, so we'll say the racquetball, for example. When we talk about the max outputs, that middle ground and the aerobic, if I say the sport is predominantly in that max output, that doesn't mean we can't go in the other ways to improve it. But if we're able to improve our max output, let's say we're working on this, then my sub-max output is going to be better, right? So if my bench goes from 300 pounds to 350, now my 75% of that is higher, right? So that's really what we're getting at on this. Now I would argue, like with your wrestling, with your racquetball, with the field sports, we're really more closer to the glycolytic and the aerobic blend, less that max output, but we still need to work on that at the same time to elevate our sub-max efforts. Does that make sense? I don't know if that answers your question or not. But now, let's say we're comparing wrestling to racquetball, I would say you're going to be way more in that middle ground than what Coach Rodriguez is with racquetball. I think he's going to be more into aerobic, right, predominantly, and a little bit in that middle ground, depending on what it is. But I would argue that I think racquetball, and it would depend on how long the rallies are, is more of the max output, and then they get to rest. And that max and then aerobic, max and aerobic. But then if they're going for a long time and it's back to back and they go for 30 seconds plus for a couple sets, then you start to get in that middle ground, and then once they recover, that kind of goes back. Does that make sense? Where with wrestling, you're going for 7 minutes, and especially if you're pushing tempo, right? You're going to be in that middle ground for a super long time, and you'll go back into aerobic a lot because guys kind of in and out. Mostly in that middle ground again, back to aerobic, just kind of back and forth. And it's all based off your heart rate too. That's a key factor here that we're not talking about. It's all going to be based off of where your heart rate's sitting at. Does that make sense? Okay, that was a great question. Okay, so the practical glycolytic work. So again, we're working on our max output. And again, this is mostly field court sports. 1 or 4 to 5 work rest. So let's say we're going to play for 30 seconds, max effort. We'll rest for 2 minutes to 2:45. So in these, your heart rate's going to stay elevated, but it's going to recover between reps, right? And in this zone, this is where we're starting to get a ton of that burn. This is awful. I hate doing this, okay? Particularly as you go into the capacity work. Okay, it's a little bit of a shorter rest. Okay, so let's say you go for a minute straight, but then you rest 3 to 4 minutes. Heart rate's going to stay elevated. You may be in complete recovery between the reps. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so then the aerobic work. Now, I think this is really important for anybody involved in the athletes in order to make sure we've got a really good aerobic base. Okay, so aerobic, if we want aerobic power, it's just a 1-to-1 work. So we'd go 1 minute on, 1 minute off. All right, it's a low intensity effort because you can't go max as hard as you can for a minute. Yes, you can try that hard for a minute, but relative to whatever your max output is, you can't sustain that for a minute. That's why it's a lower intensity. Heart rate's going to be sustained through the whole effort, and it's going to be recovered between reps. So when we go into these aerobic examples, your heart rate's not going to shoot up super high, 180 plus per minute. It's going to be probably in the 140, 150-ish zone, maybe 130, depending on what you're doing. It's just going to be right in that zone the whole time. It may be higher or lower, depending on whether or not you're doing power work or endurance or whatever your goals are. Okay, so aerobic endurance, you're going to take a longer work, shorter rest. Okay, so it says 1 to 0.3 for your rest. So that would be, you'd go 1 minute on, 20 seconds off, if the goal is aerobic endurance. And again, think when we're working power, we're working output, so I want to be fully recovered. When I'm working endurance and I'm working capacity, I don't want to be necessarily recovered all the way. Okay? And then for when I said earlier about our aerobic base and our guys, their heart rates trying to be below 60 beats per minute, this is where I'm talking about with our recovery or cardiac output work, in other words, just our aerobic work. With this, it's 20 to 60 minutes of just constant work, okay, whatever that is. It doesn't matter the means. It can be riding a bike, it can be running, it can be on a rower, whatever you want it to do. It could be a ski erg, okay? But it's just straight activity for 20 to 60 minutes. So with this, your heart rate's going to be between 120 to 150 beats-ish, okay? So when we're doing these things, we don't want to be burning as far as our muscles and whatnot. It's just constant, steady work. Just not stopping. So again, if your athlete's resting heart rate is over 60 beats a minute, they got to work on this. So I will do this in the weight room, for example, with my teams when we come back from break. And what we'll do is I'll put 20 minutes on the clock. We'll put 4 movements up. It'll pretty much just be body weight. And then they will do 1 rep of every single movement. So for example, let's say we did a pull-up, a push-up, a lunge, and then an RDL or something like that. They'll go 1 rep at each one and just constantly as many rounds as they can. And all we're doing is I want them to be able to do this work and keeping that heart rate pretty low. They're going to sweat a ton. They're going to burn a lot of calories. And in an ideal situation, I want them to be able to breathe through their nose the whole time. But that doesn't always happen. And we just do that because you're not going to get as much oxygen. Your heart rate's going to be elevated a bit. So you're actually going to get a little more work out of it than if you breathe through your mouth the whole time. And it's a little cleaner pull of oxygen. But I think Coach Kerr may talk about that a bit here in a little bit. Okay? Any questions?
So if you had an athlete doing long runs, which category would that fall in?
So you say like a long run, then I would say that's going to be in your recovery cardiac stuff. But it would depend on like how fast they're running and things like that.
Slow.
Yep. Yeah. Then I would just say that's that cardiac output or just base foundational aerobic work. Like I know I've got recovery, cardio, whatever. If it just was labeled base aerobic work, that would be it. And if you've got athletes that really struggle to get to like 20 minutes straight of activity, they just need to do that. And that's gonna improve so many other qualities without having to do anything. It's a good question. But I prefer, depending on my sports, so that example I made, I do that with wrestling. Because of their sport, I think it's more important to be able to move through body weight movements or with weight for 20 minutes straight versus have them go run. Because they'll run to death with wrestling. They'll go 20 miles and whatever. Versus I can do something like that. It's something different. It's something they're not going to do on their own. And they're going to get a little pump out of it. Because they'll go through 40 to 60 rounds in that 20 minutes. So think about it. If, let's say they did 40 rounds in 20 minutes, that's 40 pull-ups in 20 minutes, where if I did 5 sets of 5, they might not be able to do that. But they can do 1 rep every 30 seconds, that type of stuff. That's a good question, Coach. Okay, so we're done with that. So all I want to say here is how can we help you, okay? Because a lot of times coaches will ask us just, what are ways that we can help you guys? Because they'll ask us different things. And so here's kind of where I think our wheelhouse is in order to benefit you guys. Weekly planning and daily planning in terms of your practices, okay? Practice layout, energy system development, which we just talked about, load management, and then your tactical and technical preparation layout. Now, none of this is going to involve the specific drills and whatnot that you do at practice, but organizing it in a way that it builds upon each other. And that's where our wheelhouse is and how we can help you. Okay, because I'm never going to tell you how to do your sport because I don't know anything about it, but I can at least tell you how to lay it out where it's going to build upon each other. So I'm going to go through it, just to briefly go through an example that I've got that we have done that I've personally done with swim. So with Coach Grishaw, he's done asked a lot of questions, so we've done a lot of talking, and we've kind of figured it out for him. So this is literally from the other day, and what we talked about is his weekly and daily planning. So on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, what Heath does is he focuses on his practice. He's focusing on speed and power, okay? And then they're practicing at night, okay? So his days on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he's predominantly in the water, focusing on speed and power. Tuesdays, Thursdays, they've got to get up nice and early. So their theme for the day is going to be capacity, volume, aerobic work. Now, swimming is the anomaly sport of all the sports we have because it's a time sport. I can track everything there, so it's a lot easier to do these types of things. So, and what he's following is something called a high-low model, and I don't think there's any other sports that can probably follow this model, but he can. So he's not doing really much in the middle ground that we talked about. He's either pushing speed and max output, or he's pushing capacity. Because his sprinters, when it comes to swimming, they're doing stuff for 2 minutes or so or less. We just need them to get swim faster, and they get the aerobic base through the roof. So this is some stuff that Heath kind of came up with, and this is just in a graph what he does. High intensity, low intensity, alternates every other day. So now, where does this apply to another sport? If we practice for 3 days, okay, we can't go high intensity every single day. It's just, we can't do it. You could, but you're going to bury your athletes. They're going to be super tired. Nervous system's going to be shot, and they're going to hate it. Okay? You need to kind of plan out your days to have some sort of theme. Okay? Whether it's today I want to work on volume. Today I maybe want to work on my max outputs, that type of stuff, or maybe a little more intensity, whatever it is. So I like to suggest if you practice 3 days, 1 day is kind of a middle of the road day. 1 day is a high intensity day, and then 1 day is a capacity day, okay? And that's just a suggestion there. I know we all have very unique situations, so this is very general. We can talk about it if you got questions on your specific situation. Okay, and if we practice 5 days, now we can kind of bounce it around a little bit. Monday is still kind of a middle intensity day. Tuesday is our hardest day. Wednesday is our volume capacity day. Thursday, depending on what your goals are, is kind of a middle of the road, medium high intensity day. Friday is your call of either a high intensity day or a capacity day, and then you recover over the weekend. But again, this is just an example, right? You can do what you want. The main lesson that we're trying to get across here is that there's at least a constant theme for that day. It's not, or throughout the week, and that we're building upon itself. So we want, and the reason why, for example, we do the high intensity day and then we do a capacity day after is because your nervous system is going to be shot. So your brain and everything's going to be really tired that day. So when we go our capacity day, the intensity is nice and low. So I'm able to recover a bit, and we're able to push the volume. Okay, but again, it's not at a high intensity. But that's why we do that after, because it's going to help you recover, and then I can come back Thursday and bring the intensity again. Okay. Okay, and like we just talked about, energy system development. This is for swimming for Heath. We broke down a 60-second clock for him of he's going to train his athletes in a 1 to 15 seconds, 15 to 30, 30 to 45, 45 to 60. So he may have a drill that goes 1 to 15. He may have a drill that goes 30 to 45. It's all his call. But because he is hammering more of a max output world, we want to be able to break down those different capacities for him, because if I want to push the capacity of something, I need to go right above it. So for example, if Heath wants his guys to be able to swim more 15-second sprints or 10-second sprints at a high level, keeping that quality output, when we do capacity work, we need to be right above it. So I need to go right above where I need to be. That's going to have the biggest and best transfer. Okay, either going right below where I need to be or right above where I need to be. It depends on what it is. And if you're thinking, okay, I need to wrestle for 6 minutes straight, or let's say I need to go through a period for 2 minutes straight, I need to be able to wrestle for a little bit longer than 2 minutes, or I need to be able to wrestle at a higher intensity for less than 2 minutes, and that's going to build upon itself. Does that make sense? All right, so then last slide here. So when we talk about tactical and technical planning, and again, this is your wheelhouse, this is your sport. Okay, there's 5 general themes that we can kind of have on each day. So we have our technical days. So in other words, you can just take the full day, we're working on skills, okay, and just fundamentals. We can do a small field or area emphasis. Okay, so if you're on a field sport or you're in the middle ground, you're not going to be at full speeds. You're going to have a lot more change of direction. There's going to be less space or a smaller vision field. Okay, there's full field or area emphasis, faster speeds, less change of direction, more space, larger vision field. So if, let's say I want my guys to wrestle just in the inside circle, they don't have as much room. They've got to think about the space that's around them. They can't necessarily plan and prep the same way. They've got to make different decisions. If I'm in racquetball and I want my guys to only play on one half of the court and they can't go outside of that, they're going to play a lot different than I've got the full width of the room. But with that, you're going to force them to play a little bit different. They're going to have to think a lot different, and they're going to have to make different decisions. So if they get in tight-knit stuff, you can force them to do that. Or let's say with racquetball, you want them to play on just the front half instead of the back half, depending on what you want to do. You can also do a mixture of small and full, and then also you have scrimmaging and then live. Okay, so again, these are just general themes you can have for each of your days. And if you're not going into your day with a general theme, then you're leaving a lot of potential performance gains on the table. Because again, we go back, the physical and mental stress is all stress, okay? And if it's a mental day, like let's say you're doing a full field emphasis and you're going to go over just your strategy for the game or whatever you're doing, that's still going to be a ton of stress, even though physically it's not that taxing. And then with the scrimmaging and live, if they can't execute here, okay, that's where we go back and we think, okay, is it a tactical issue, is it a technical issue, or is it a physical issue? And for most athletes, it tends to not be a physical issue. Now it can be, it 100% can be, depending on where you're at. But going back and figuring out, do they need better technique? Do they need to understand their sport better? Or do we need to up physical things? Okay, as far as why they're not executing when they're there. Okay? And that's all I got for me. Are there any questions for that? I know it's a lot. Yes?
Do you guys work with the physiology labs at all?
We don't. We could. I think we could.
Is there any way that we could possibly use
I'm sure they would love to do that yeah, they would love to do that because they have to do research all the time and they're asking for bodies to always do that. So yeah, no, that's something we could definitely do for sure. And there's different things we can do. We don't have anything here that we can do that, but there's different tests we can do for that that anaerobic capacity and stuff. So you remember when we did those 300s in the time? Kind of same idea. There's stuff we can do in here with sleds and things like that to kind of see where they're at. But no, yeah, that'd be something we could do for sure. We'll reach out, especially since you got time. We got time. Any other questions? Feel good?
I'm looking at that model that you talked about
Yep.
before.
Yes.
Definitely more technical and the psychological as far as mental.
Yes. Yeah.
And then mine's physical. The tactical, I'm trying to apply that to my sport.
I don't know if it can. Yeah.
Once I know the rules of the match,
Yeah.
you read the match bulletin and you know how many shots you need to shoot.
Yep.
There's not that much more, other than maybe you understand your rifle better.
Yeah.
But mine's all technique.
Yeah, and so and depending on your sport, some things are going to be a greater emphasis than others. So, and I'm giving a lot of wrestling examples just because it's a good example. Like I put a premium on physical preparation on wrestling more so than any other sport that we have here. Any other sport, because they got to manhandle somebody else. It's relative to a body weight. It's not like, let's say, lacrosse. Yes, the physical side is important, but if they understand the game, they don't have to be the strongest or fastest person there. So all things equal, okay, and again, all things equal on the physical prep side, if that's equal, your technical preparation. And like you're saying, I think so think the tactical, like you've already said, is going to be the foundation of shooting the rifle, your stance is right, and whatnot. Technical being, I'm sorry, I got that flipped. Technical being laying on the ground in your rifle and whatnot. Now, I would argue that there may not be a huge tactical of am I trying to hit targets in a certain order or things of that nature? I'm not sure if you are.
Well, it's very specific what they shoot.
Okay.
And in time.
Yeah.
So once they know, okay, you have 20 minutes to shoot.
Yep.
Your 40 record shots for.
Okay.
You just do it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So
I'm familiar with skeet shooting, not familiar with rifle.
basically, you get in position. I'm going to give you 20 minutes to shoot your sighters and your 20 record shots.
Okay.
And you don't get out of position.
Okay.
And you stay there the whole time. So during practice, we're focusing. It's all technique. It's your lining up your sights, your sight
Yep.
picture, your trigger squeeze, your breath control, your follow through. So we're always working on technique.
Yeah.
But mentally, if you're not prepared,
Yep.
you start shooting tens and you don't know what to do with that.
Yep.
You get too excited and emotional about that. So we talk a lot about that. And physically, though, because they have to stay in those positions for so long,
Yep.
they're standing between position for 40 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
So they need the physical to be able to, they need core strength.
Yep.
For sure, to be able to do all that.
Yeah, and so let's say for your sport coach, right, it's maybe 0% tactical or maybe 1%, I don't know, right? And then for technical, maybe that's 50%, 75 of the deal, right? Physical could be, maybe a smaller percentage, but psychological is probably a massive piece. In order for them to be dialed in, that they're not all over the place, that because psychologically, that's going to have a huge impact on where their heart rate's at.
Right.
And that's key.
The athletes this weekend are hammer shaking.
Yep. And if that,
I've never seen that in practice.
yeah.
So I made a note, and we just kind of talked through it afterwards, like what happened. She's like, well, I just got really excited, and I tried to go through, but then we go through the technique, is you can breathe through it, focus, and there's things that they have to do.
Yeah.
They know, we have a shot plan, they know what they need to do each time they make a shot. So if you have something happening over here, or somebody's stuff falls over and totally disrupts
Yep.
the thing, they know to go back. They have a little prompt to go back.
Yeah, it's just a checklist.
To get back in.
Yep. And that's perfect. And so that's with your physical and psychological kind of blending it there is going back to the resting heart rate, right? If they've got a low resting heart rate, they're going to be able to bring it down a lot faster, and they're breathing properly. And Coach Kerr is going to talk about it. They're breathing properly and they're getting that dialed in. It's going to bring the heart rate back down, because if you get too amped up, your vision goes away, right? And there's a sweet little zone of everything's perfectly dialed. I'm not even having to think. My vision's great. I'm able to focus. So yeah, no, that's a good question. And I do think for you this is a premium, again, more so than this. Yes, this is important, but I do think the psychological is probably the number one key aside from the technique.
Once they learn the technique,
Yep.
and they're a seasoned shooter, it's all.
Yeah, 100%.
Are your opponents shooting next to you?
You're on the road, except for coronavirus.
I was gonna say good technical, but you scared him.
Well,
The mind games, make noises, knock stuff over.
game face, but
Yeah.
you don't usually know. There's
I'm just
shooting
messing with
etiquette, you know, you be polite to the person next to you. Yeah, so, yeah.
But that's good, Coach. Any questions? You feel good?
No, I'm just processing how I can implement.
Yep. And it's when it comes to your, like we're already talking about, technical, and you already know this, context is key, right? If they're not having to shoot next to somebody, they're not having to do it on a clock, say they're just able to lay out there on their own and there's no clock, there's no pressure, then it's not necessarily going to be a great transfer because they're not having to take in, obviously you can't recreate somebody being at the national championship having to shoot those targets, but at the same time you can do your best to try to put that same sort of stress where they've got to go through the checklist or
Change the time sometimes.
Yeah.
You have this much minute to do your shots.
Yep.
So you try to add pressure. You
Yeah.
get that same feeling, but going to competitions like we did this weekend, it was nice to see the team being able to be at that competition level and handle the stress of being in the match.
yeah. Yeah, and the breathing part's going to be a huge part to that. Let's see. Any other questions? We feel good? If you got them, I can answer them. But then Kerr's going to come on up and do his thing.
Good job, Coach, that's good stuff.
Thank you, Coach.
The language has changed throughout the year, because I was thinking, you used the word context, I guess what I had learned, same thing, was just specificity.
Yeah, it's the same. So the anaerobic and aerobic terms, the one's just saying it uses oxygen, one's saying it doesn't. And the aerobic energy system is then within, there's two other little sub-energy systems, and that's just that ATP and glycolytic. And being more specific is all. If you think anaerobic, just think for general terms, 60 seconds or less, and then aerobic is, 60 seconds plus. So when you're in the, just think when you're in the burn, when you're in that middle ground, we're in that glycolytic, we feel awful, we hate it. And then we're in their ATP, that max effort. Guys can do that all day because it's not hard. It's just a max output, and it's all nervous system driven. So think nervous system driven, and then the middle ground is just kind of muscle cardiovascular health, if that makes sense.
Yeah, within a 7-minute time period in our sport, there's a mixture of all of those, actually.
Exactly. And there's different times where, Kerr, you ready? There's different times, in the match where, okay, ATP is going to take over. Now I would argue that's going to be super limited, but it's mostly going to be that glycolytic middle ground, and they're having to operate at a high intensity. And as you know, if guys are, say they get after it for a good 30 seconds, they're gonna rest, not rest, but they're gonna take it off for a little bit. They're in that aerobic zone, and they're back at it. So yeah, you're going in between 100%. And I think about any of your larger kids that'll kind of go around the mat for a little while, and they just kind of press. It's the same idea. It's not always going to be in that glycolytic the whole time pushing the pressure, and then there's going back and forth between the two. But if we push the max outputs, like we're saying that ATP, we're using all three, all those sub-max outputs are going to be better. And that's the crucial thing, is understanding that if we can make that pyramid even taller, then all that stuff underneath is going to be better.
I was thinking, as a side note for coach, being that you're skating skill, the isometric, is that the right term? Isometric exercise is crucial.
Yeah, massive. Yeah. And if obviously you're doing them in your sport anyway, so you're getting a ton of work there, but there's other different positions, and myself and Coach Kerr can kind of figure out what you need.
I already told them they're gonna start power strengthening and build their aerobic base, and I was gonna talk to you all about how we could.
Perfect.
We never had time
Yeah.
at this point, but now in the program, we're gonna start doing it.
Yeah, and different, because I know you guys have some stuff, but it's like, you can just do loaded carries. You can carry some stuff around, kind of up and back. That's all just
Like
great.
Veronica.
Exactly. And just do general stuff like that, and it'll help you huge. You ready?
Cool. Does anyone else need to use the restroom before we get going? Everyone feels good? Cool. All right. Awesome. Ross, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And coaches, thank you for the great questions and just trying to use us as a resource. As I was sitting back here, I was kind of reflecting on what Coach Castro was saying of a Canadian pastor, we're going to call it being detained, and just what a blessing that we have here at Liberty. Number one, for all of our faith, but just the tremendous blessings that we have. Just looking around in this weight room, right? I was speaking to my wife a couple of weeks ago of the amount of growth that I've got to experience in 2020 has just been tremendous. So this is a truly special place. Thank you for being a huge part of that. Ross, thanks for always kickstarting these and getting us going. So with that kind of being said, coaches, thank you for being here, but truly use Ross and I as a resource. I'm just going to be straight up to you, Coach. I feel like I made promises and I let you down this year. It's been a rough one, but hopefully this time doesn't last forever. And what I've really learned is any team success is the university's success, is spreading the gospel success. We are truly at a university where we have a huge mission and a purpose. So thank you for being here, because it, in my mind, lets us know you're living for a mission and for a purpose of we truly get to train champions for Christ. What an absolute blessing that we have here at Liberty. All right, so I've changed my slides around a million times and what I've wanted to talk about a million times. So if a couple things go like, oh, that ain't right, just kind of let's roll with it and kind of keep going here. All right, yeah, so right off the bat, that's wrong. So we'll just kind of get going right into it. So travel tips. One thing that I could say for certain with coaching a sport is at some point we're going to travel. So hopefully I'm going to give you some good practical examples that you could kind of bring back to the troops and we could rock and roll with. So first thing, when we travel, we're either driving, flying, but at some point our rear end is going to be on a seat. So when we sit, our butt literally goes to sleep. Okay, so we've all felt that sensation of a foot or a limb falling asleep, but kind of the same thing happens with our rear end. And when that happens, anytime we are moving, something is going to be off. If there's a weak link, the entire chain is going to be weak. And I think we could say that in any sport, your midsection is important. So I don't just think of your core as your six-pack abs. I think of it from here to here, and your glutes are a gigantic part of that. So what can we do? How can we help from having a sleepy butt when we show up? Well, at some point, if you do stop, just have your athletes walk around. Okay, so I've been on a few road trips. We've stopped at a gas station. We've stopped at rest stops. Have them take a lap. Your athletes are going to hate it. Oh, I don't want to do this. Well, I'm the coach, I want to win, I know more than you. It's kind of all you really need to say, right? Tell the bus driver, hey, drop us off and go as far away as you can. We'll come to you, okay? So walk around whenever possible. Hip flexor stretch. So right now I am flexing my bicep, right? Think flex, so flexing. So right now I'm doing the exact same thing with my hip, okay? So when I'm bringing it up, I'm flexing my hip. So we have a muscle right here that flexes my hip. My bicep flexes my arm. My hip flexor flexes my hip. So this muscle gets very tight from all of our sitting that we do. So we want to stretch that out. We'll go over it later, but if you've seen anything like this, just a classic hip flexor stretch position. So by stretching our hip flexors out, it's going to help get our glutes going, because I've never been able to, as hard as I've tried, been able to do a bicep curl while I'm also doing a tricep push down. Okay, so basically, because my bicep is on and it's so tight and it's being used, my tricep has to be off. So all of our sitting tightens our hip flexors. Because these are on so tight and being used, these have to be off. Okay, so again, one of the reasons why our butts go to sleep. So while you're on the bus, basically you could kind of do a hip flexor stretch there. I always try to do this in my airports before flight, but we have our bus seat. We just throw your foot there, put your knee on the bench. You can support yourself on the seat in front of you, and now all of a sudden I'm getting a phenomenal stretch right here on the front of my leg. Okay? If we're tight on the front of our legs, really bad things happen. So actually, one of the reasons why Grandpa scoots around all the time is his hips are so dumped forward that he can't take big steps. Like, it just physically, it's not going to happen. But a well-postured 29-year-old, check this out, I can just move really well. Okay? So when we're on the bus, have them walk around, stretch those hip flexors. This is stuff they are not going to want to do it. Force them, right? They'll thank you later when they're older. So once we arrive at our final destination, whether it's we're arriving directly at our competition or a hotel the day before, athletes aren't going to want to do it, but do some sort of warm-up. Have them move in some way. Maybe it's just a walk. Maybe it's get in line, pull your knees up, swing some legs, just something to get blood flow, right? That's basically it. Get blood moving. Again, your athletes aren't going to want to do it, but you're the coach, make them. And what I've seen some teams do is just play the game spike ball, if you're familiar. It's a net, it's a ball, and they absolutely love it. You could hype it up as a coach. Winner gets their Chipotle paid for this day when normally the team has to. All right, if you just bring a little medal or a little trophy that you get for 99 cents over at the store, that's going to mean something. They're going to want to win that trophy. So you could play spike ball as well. So more travel tips. Nutrition on the road. Drink water. You have to make it always available. I've been on road trips where there was no water on the bus, no water offered at the hotel, and I just remember thinking, like, this is not good. I had to go to the coach and say, hey, break the P card out and let's buy some water here. Always make sure it's available. The easiest way to decrease your performance is to be dehydrated. I give a really nice long speech about how water helps conduct electricity. Well, God designed us and we're electrical. Our brain tells our body what to do. If we don't have that good water in us, we won't be as electrical. Be hydrated. It's very, very important. Okay, here's what kills me. On road trips, I see on the front of the buses so many just like snacks. All right, nothing wrong with a snack here or there, but gummies with fruit on the package is not fruit. Right? So let's start to be smart about what we're offering to our athletes or encouraging them to get. So avoid those unhealthy snacks. We're on the road. All right, so there's travel stress. We're eating unfamiliar foods because maybe we're not at the or at our apartment cooking for ourselves. We're sleeping in an unfamiliar bed. We're drinking unfamiliar water. These are all other stressors on us. So let's not eat gummies and add even more stress to our body, okay? Because even though we might enjoy it, it's putting a stress on us we don't want. As far as restaurants, Chipotle and Panera, as far as I know, serve the highest quality of foods. Okay, so they're going to have more non-GMO, non-stressful foods onto the body. Okay, I'm sorry.
We ate both those places this weekend.
Perfect. Were you up in Ohio?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So when you look at the meat offering from a Chipotle versus a McDonald's or a Wendy's, even though it's not your beautiful grass-fed, you loved it and cared for it cow beef, it's way better and way better quality than what you're going to be getting at another fast food type of place. So just trust me on that one. If you only have one or two places that you're able to go, choose a Chipotle, choose a Panera. Now, for me personally, I don't know if the offerings at Panera provide enough calories for a higher intensity sport. So just something to think about there, and then always encourage, load up on that rice at Chipotle. So down here, as you can see, carbs, 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 carbs. Coach Ross alluded to it when he was talking about our glycolytic system. how that uses a lot of glucose and carbs. So if you're competing in a sport that's really intense in some capacity, if at any point during your sport you have to open your mouth to breathe, you are fueling through carbs. You must be consuming them. Obviously for you, Coach Castro, with guys cutting weight, the other word to this carb is carbohydrate. So could help retain some water. So just kind of be careful there for your little guys. But think of your body as a tank of gas. You don't want to be rolling up to your competition with an eighth of a quarter missing. You want it fully loaded. Your body could store carbs in all nooks and crannies you never even thought about. Load it up. Lots of carbs. Breads, pastas, if your athletes could tolerate them, don't tell them not to eat them. Right? If you have an athlete who just eat a bagel and it doesn't affect them, beautiful. But if you have an athlete who eats a bagel and they're running to the toilet, obviously let's avoid that. So something interesting, Coach, when we were at the coaches meeting, you were mentioning you want just a dead heart rate. So very, very complex carbs for your team. Nothing that is white, right? We want sweet potato versus a regular potato. We want whole wheat versus just bleached. But we could talk a little bit more about that. I think maybe some higher fats in your team's diet would help quite a bit. All right, so these are just a quick, easy type of thing that you could encourage your athletes to take with them. So I have been on very, very poorly funded road trips, and I've been on very, very well-funded road trips. And on both of them, the thought that goes through my mind is this isn't enough. This is not enough food. So I've kind of realized like our athletes need to bring more, and they need to be responsible for fueling their body just as much as we may be as coaches. So you can take a picture, you can write it down, but packets of oatmeal, right? Even if it's not the most organic, beautiful oatmeal, who cares? It's food. Have them bring it. Every single hotel or any place you go to has a microwave, and they can just eat these raw. I used to. I'm still alive. Instant rice. So you could bring a package of instant rice. Just try to not have the craziest seasonings and sauces on it. Maybe not the best, but what my dream would be is Club Sports purchases 50 rice cookers, and when a team is traveling, we distribute them out accordingly. Ross could attest to this. When I travel, I bring a rice cooker with me on road trips because I have weird dietary restrictions, number one, but then number two, I get hungry. So I bring a rice cooker. On my last major road trip I was on, it was down in Texas. I brought a rice cooker and a George Foreman grill, and I was grilling pork chops out by the pool. Okay? It was kind of cold, so I didn't get to go in the pool. If you have athletes who bring instant rice, right, a bag that you can heat up in the microwave, and they bring a can of beans that they could split with their roommate. Maybe we don't want to down an entire can of beans before a game, but that's a great source of carbohydrate, fat, and complete protein. Right? Real simple, real easy. It smashes together and stores and gets carried well. Peanut butter, PB&J, if they could tolerate it, always a great option. Bananas, apples, oranges. Bananas are so cheap. Bring 5 bushels. Canned fish, eat it in the lobby. Don't be that person to eat it in the room. It's gross. It smells bad. Protein powders are always a good option because they're compact. They travel well. And then mixed nuts. Try to go for the plain, not the honey roasted and all that junk. So there's more foods. This is not by all means an exhaustive list, but this kind of just gets you going. And you know, why can't everyone on our team bring 4 or 5 oatmeal packets? Right? It's real simple. And just something to, again, add those carbs into it.
Coach Chris?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Would you recommend purchasing a small microwave having that travel with us?
Yeah, for sure. If you could fund it, and like maybe you just have a travel cooler, right? So when the last time I traveled, I just brought a giant tub, and that had all my stuff in it. My rice cooker had my George Foreman grill, and then my kind of like utensils. I brought a cutting board, fork, knife, and everything. But yeah, if depending on where you're staying, most hotel lobbies will have a microwave.
That's a problem for us because we have to weigh in.
Oh, yeah.
So we get to the school, we can't eat until we weigh in. Once you weigh in at the school,
Yeah.
then we have to have available to us right then, within an hour.
So at that point, I would suggest, if you're talking about post weigh-ins, I would suggest as many liquids as you can consume and as many, speak up here, Ross, if I'm saying something you don't agree with. You wrestled. But try to go for liquids because those are consumed really quickly. And then you're going to need a lot of simple carbohydrate, but then also kind of complex carbohydrate to last you. So I would go with stuff that's easily smashed, chewed, and drank as the number one. I wouldn't really worry about heating up any meals because at that point, like, you just want to consume. So the sport I competed in, weightlifting, it was a 2-hour weigh-in. I never made crazy weight cuts, but I'd cut weight and then 2 hours later I'm on the platform trying to lift heavy weights. So I would replenish with my favorite kind of like peanut butter, banana, peanut butter and jelly type of thing, something light, and then I would just try to drink. And that's all it was. I would drink half Gatorade, half water, and I would even add a little bit more salt to that because I tended to sweat out some salt. My first competition, I thought, I could probably eat a little bit of Chipotle. And then in my sport, we wear a belt, and once I strapped it on, I go, oh, that was dumb. Well, that was really dumb. So hopefully by now your guys are going to kind of know like their secret sauce at post weigh-in, but I would stay away from like a hot food because those kind of just tend to be a little bit heavier. Now, maybe after their first match, if they have time to wait, they could have more-ish of a meal. But it really depends on the guy. If you have a nervous Nelly, he's going to throw that up later. Really depends. Does that sound right, Ross?
Yeah, I say PB&J to banana.
Yeah. Bananas are fantastic. They taste good, easy to eat, travel super well, and they're dirt cheap.
And the sugar and jelly lets you digest it.
Yeah.
You can use it faster.
Yeah.
Greek yogurt.
Greek yogurt?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you keep it cold, yeah.
That's some protein.
Yeah, I would say because it has low carbohydrate, like pretty good. Now we just have to be careful of like, will the athletes want it and consume it because it's plain, it might be gross to them. They might be tempted to like, coaches and look and let me add some honey, and then that's our carb insulin spike that we want to be concerned about. But yeah, very, very good question. Yeah, plain Greek yogurt, high fat, high protein, that would be pretty solid, I think. Yeah. Good there? Good. Am I missing anything? No. Okay. But for you, coach, I'd say a lot of mixed nuts. It'll keep heart insulin levels pretty steady, fills them up, lots of fat, lots of protein. Those could be good. All right. Now going on to movement. So for movement, we're going to cover kind of some basic foundational movements. Baby, kind of keep that in your mind. And then key mobility spots within the body and within some of our sports. All right. So I'll blow your mind here. Besides working at Liberty and all those kind of things, we all have one thing in common within this room. One thing I guarantee we've all experienced in our life. At some point, we were all babies. Okay, right? So when we're children, if you've had children, you know that when they first are born, they're always laid on their back. Okay? As they get a little older, then what happens? They get their tummy time. Okay? And then all of a sudden, they can kind of just roll over themselves. And then they get on all fours because they see that over there and they want to go get it. All right? And then they start to crawl. They start to explore and look around. Then they get sit up. Then they start to kneel. All right? And then that baby is kind of in this down position. Then all of a sudden, they can start to stand, even though it's not great. And then kind of the last evolution of the baby is they start to walk, okay? And that's what gait is. So everybody has gone through these at some point in their lives. Maybe now we're not getting down into that beautiful squat anymore. We may have some wear and tear and extra mileage, but everybody at some point has gone through these foundational movement patterns. And if you have not, then that's when a doctor or a physical therapist will intervene with that child because they're not meeting these milestones. So from being on your back supine to crawling, those are kind of our fundamental. And then we transition, and then functional. Most of our sports are played on 2 feet at some point within it. Okay? So supine, just think face up. Prone, I doubt all of our coaches in here are very involved in the Call of Duty video game, but when you crawl around on your stomach, that's called going prone. I learned that sophomore year of high school when I started learning what Call of Duty was. Okay, so when I'm assessing an athlete, if they're really bad at something, right? So let's just go back. If I just hit backspace, that should be good, right, Ross? Okay, thank God. All right, so if I'm assessing an athlete and they're awful here, whether it's walking or running, then I'm gonna take it back. How do they look when they're standing? Okay, so if I see someone walking like this, all right, and then I see them standing like this, okay, that kind of makes sense. They stand a little funny, and that's why they're walking a little funny, okay? And then if I see somebody kind of walking or maybe running a little odd, and then I ask them to do a squat for me, and it looks like this, then it's okay, their squat is kind of broken. That pattern is broken, and therefore everything above it is going to kind of be broken as well, okay? So we assess. If there's something broken, we go back and we regress before we progress, okay? So here are some basic movements. Please feel free to join me to roll around. Just let me know if I'm in the frame here, Ross. So we're gonna go through a few of these. So the very first one, supine, when we are face up, we should be able to do a basic dead bug, okay? All right, so for dead bugs, we are on our back, basically like we're sitting in a chair, okay? So legs, knees, hips, all at a 90-90 position. I have my head on the ground, try to put my low back flat to the ground, and my arms are up. So for a dead bug, we should be able to move opposite arm and leg and return them. So as I'm doing this, what I'm not doing is allowing my other arm or leg to move, okay? So the worst athletes I've ever coached cannot do this their very first time. You could pick them out in the room. You go, all right, that person's not going to move well. So what ends up happening is, as I'm trying to move one arm and leg at a time, another one will start to move. Neurologically, they just get fried. Okay, so because we're so used to this, anytime we go to this, it just, the wires get crossed. It just doesn't work well. So our body loves this gait, right? Loves that walking. But from being like this, like this, like this, we just get fried. So best place to start with your team tomorrow, hey, get on your back, try this dead bug. YouTube it, kind of understand how to do it, and watch who can. Your better brain functioning people will be able to move it well, and your less brain functioning people won't. Okay, so for this prone pattern, up next, we're on our stomach. This is called a cross crawl Superman. So I'm going to start by squeezing one of my cheeks. So squeeze my right glute, and then I lift right leg, left arm. Then I'll squeeze my left glute, lift left leg, right arm. Okay, right glute, right leg, left arm. Left glute, left leg, right arm. So you could see how I kind of have an X pattern here, kind of a cross pattern. Now when I go to stand up, it's the exact same thing. This leg goes back, this arm kind of goes forward. Oh, and now we're here in our kind of walking pattern. Okay, so for the cross crawl Superman, that helps with making sure as this leg goes back that it's in the right firing pattern. That's why we want to go glute first, then we lift our leg. So we can kind of get into that later if you have questions. But as I look at this and I look at coaches, I think, okay, here are some basic movements that we could do every day before a practice or before a competition, just to get those wires reconnected and firing well, okay? So maybe your sport doesn't involve a lot of being on your back, or you definitely don't want to be on your back. That's not the point. We're not looking for sport specificity. We're looking for human specificity, right? If you breathe, sleep, drink water, all that, you're a human, you should be able to do these quality movements if all things are working properly. So maybe the reason why your athlete just can't seem to nail this one thing within the sport is something is broken up the chain, okay? So if one of your movement patterns is broken, it's like a kink in your hose. Even though it's turned full blast on over at the house and you're trying to spray this tree or this flower or whatever, you miss that kink back there, and so your power, your water flow just isn't there. It's the same thing. If you have a movement pattern that's wrong, you could have this unreal brain, super powerful, it's not gonna get there. Okay, so we'll skip down to quadruped, bird dogs. So if you remember our cross crawl, how we were here, opposite arm and leg, just like in our dead bug. So quadruped, just think quad 4. So now we're in this position and we're extending out, opposite arm and leg. Okay, you'll notice a theme, opposite arm and leg, our body loves it. Okay, and then we'll take that right into a bear crawl. So for bear crawl, we go opposite arm and leg. So right hand, left knee goes forward. Left hand, right knee. You could get a lot out of bear crawls. If you take a team of athletes who don't bear crawl really well, and then all of a sudden they bear crawl really well, good things are going to happen to that team. They're going to become better neurological movers. Okay, and again, maybe in your sport you're not getting on your hands and knees. Hey, this isn't specific. I know, maybe not to your sporting movement, technique, or tactically, but this is human specific. Okay? Hammer those top 5, and if you have questions, we could kind of go over those later. Yes, Coach?
Not a question, but
yeah.
a comment. I think it's fascinating what you're covering here because there have been studies, educational studies based upon learning deficiencies, and they found that they actually integrated these types of movements for those that have learning disabilities.
Yes.
And neurologically, it's supposed to increase their capacity to, cognitively quite a bit. And so it's interesting, the carryover this has not only physically but also neurologically and mentally.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, these are all just, you have to be able to do these as a human. And if you can't, there's just something a little off there. So again, if we're trying to connect just being able to sit in a chair and focus, well, if something in the chain is kind of off, maybe they're not going to hammer that squatting or that kneeling pattern. We need to start more basic. At the end, if we have time, we'll go over infinity walks, and those are also really popular with child development, but for a sporting perspective are phenomenal. So yeah, I'll try to make a mental note of that. But yeah, well, you'll get these slides, and honestly, you just Google rolling or just come ask me and I'll roll on the ground for you all day long and show you how phenomenal I am at that. When I was a younger, more arrogant, less knowledgeable strength coach, I did not care at all about bear crawls and rolling and bird dogs. But now as I get older and I just understand the whole machine better, we can't skip these things. Very important. So key mobility spots, basically the joints, right? The ankles, the hips, the T-spine, the shoulders. So we'll kind of just go through some things here. Let me grab a weight. So I have spent many a minute trying to stretch ankles and have had 0 results. So spring ankle exercises were invented by a gentleman. Basically, it's you're holding a position where your ankle is flexed. That's kind of it. If you are, I'm going to say, a human, you need to have good ankle mobility. If you don't, bad things are going to happen to you. So when I'm doing this spring ankle exercise, I just need any sort of ledge. It could be this high, it could be 1 inch off the ground, just any kind of ledge, a step, a stair. You put your heels off of it. That's going to help strengthen your foot. You drive your knees as far forward as you can in this good position, okay? We don't want to be down here, right? Good position, and then you just hold. It's that simple, okay? This will help get your ankle to be able to bend and move properly. I've had many athletes with poor ankles, and those athletes are always hurt with a bad back, okay? So spring ankle, again, we have our heels floating or off something, drive your knee forward, and then just hold on. Okay, nice and easy. 10, 15 seconds to start, and then build it up. Where are they going to feel it? They'll feel it on the ankle. They're going to feel it a lot around the knee. God designed us unbelievably. If our knee is weak and that ankle starts to come forward, our ankle will know our knee's weak, and it's going to lock our ankle down, and that's all it's going to give us. Just tremendous the way that God designed us. Okay, hips, hip flexor stretch. So this is the classic, beautiful hip flexor stretch position. Very important to have our back toes tucked. A lot of people like to go flat. This is all about creating pressure within our hip flexor area. I have my back toes tucked. I'm actively pulling my hips up to my belly button. So you can see my hips are dumped forward. Now I'm actively pulling them up. Hips towards the belly button. I like to think neck to the sky or touch the ceiling with my head, and we could slightly lean forward. But if you're pulling your hips up to your belly button in this stretching position, you're really going to feel that one. Okay? Very, very important. We have to hit hip flexors because we sit so much, have to hit the hip flexor. Pigeon pose. So I like to just kind of line up my feet and then just kind of drop it down here. Okay? So looking for a stretch kind of on the outside of our hip. All right, so pigeon pose, that's going to work the external rotation of our hip. We'll get to that in a second. So pigeon pose. A lot of people like to just dump out here and go, oh, coach, I don't feel anything. Well, no duh. So have them get into a position where they feel it. I like to keep this front shin at 90 rather than bringing it back here. Okay? Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you remembered. I showed you that one once, coach. Yeah. So I have my leg or my hip bone. Right now I am internally rotating it, and now I'm externally rotating it. So that pigeon pose helps stretch out our external rotation. For internal, this position is called a 90-90. So if you lean forward, kind of hits that pigeon pose sort of external on this leg. And then if we kind of get tall, sort of lean in, this hip is in our internal rotation. So internally, we're working this one back here. I have very poor internal rotation because I squatted for a lot of years. Shout out. Don't do bilateral squats. Okay, I'm trying to raise this back foot. Oh, God. Okay, so someone with good internal rotation can just lift this leg all the way up. Hockey players have very good internal rotation. And some of my females, they take that foot and just lift it up to here and they're like, what am I supposed to do? Oh, freak. Okay, so we could do some pumps here, just kind of play around with it, but trying to loosen up this hip capsule so that my hip can internally rotate. Okay, T-spine. Within our spine, we have 24 spine bones or vertebrae. We have 7 up in our neck. Kind of at the base of our neck, there's a little bump there. That will be our 7th spine bone. We then have 12. So think where your ribs come out. So your ribs are also connected to your back, right? We can see them here. We never think about the ribs in the back, but they're there. So our T-spine or our thoracic spine, that's where our ribs come out of. And then we have our lumbar spine in the back. Lumbar, low back, okay. From being like this, all day long, our upper backs are just a mess. So most issues are T-spine related and lat related, in my opinion, especially our bench press heroes. So many a sport we need to rotate. Okay, we have a body here and we need to sort of be in a position. If you have any sort of upper body movement in your sport, you probably need to work on the T-spine. So simplest way for a sport coach to stretch out that T-spine, we'll get down here. We double stack ankles, knees, shoulders, hips because I don't want my low back to kind of break. Okay, so if I do this, and my low back is kind of curved, now I'm just stretching my low back. But when I'm here and I'm purposeful about it, now this low back is in place, now I'm stretching that upper back or that T-spine, okay? So we double stack our ankles, knees, shoulders, hips, kind of this 90 position like we're sitting in a chair. I have my shoulders double stacked, and then we can open here, okay, T-spine. And then the example I have are thread the needle, a very easy, very basic exercise. We are going to reach our hand all the way through. Make sure we don't bend this elbow. People love to cheat, okay? Reach through and then reach up. Reach through and then reach up. Very simple, very easy, and you can even hold it here at the end. Give yourself a breath in, breath out, and loosen it up even more. Okay? Threading the needle, working that T-spine. For shoulders, hanging from a pull-up bar, really easy. I don't have a pull-up bar. Okay. Child pose, lat stretch. So if you kind of glue down your side muscle here and try to lift your arm up, it doesn't really work well. So a lot of people will touch down or YMCA like this rather than get up here because their lats are actually tight. And they just assume it's their shoulder muscle. So they hit this with a cross ball and do all these crazy things. Most of the time it's the tight lats. Okay? So child's pose lat stretch. We're just down here. Walk your hands over. And you're going to feel a great stretch all through the side right here, helping to stretch that out, loosen that up. And then that will allow our shoulder to be more free. What I like to say to my athletes, if you have to get, let's say, up to a ball up here, no matter what, you're going to get to it. It just might not be the right way. You might be bypassing some basic movements and hurting yourself. So you're probably wondering, what's all this? Breathe, relax, breathe, relax, breathe, relax. If we do the classic toe touch, here's how most people will touch their toes. Okay, that's not doing anything. You're basically telling your body, hey, we are in a battle. Okay, and that's not what we want when we're trying to stretch something. Because when our body senses stress, do we go like, or do we clench up and get tight? Okay, so during warm-ups, during any sort of breathing, during any movement type work, we need to be relaxed and just breathe and relax into it. So I have a pretty poor T-spine. So what's the best way to demo this? When I'm doing this exercise, I always bring it open and then I breathe in for 4 and out for 4. So you can see just how through breath, I'm bringing that arm down. So when we breathe in, it creates stability. When we breathe out, it creates relaxation. Okay? So we never want to be holding our breath. We want to just be calm and breathing, calm and breathing. Too many people will get all tight and stretched and feel pain. It's not the way to do it because you're telling your body, tighten up, there's pain. We want to be calm and relaxed. Breathe through it. If you could breathe comfortably, you own that movement. So right now I'm standing, I breathe comfortably, I own this. Okay, so just kind of an example there. All right, breathing, the most important thing we'll do all day. I hear a presentation every now and then. The first question the presenter asks is, what's the one thing you can't live without? And people are like, water, shelter, food, yeah. And then the right answer is just oxygen. Can't go very long without that. You will be brain dead, you'll die. Okay, so nose versus mouth breathing. And then Ross, just let me know if I'm missing anything. Just shout it out, okay? Nose versus mouth breathing. I first started learning about breathing when I was in high school watching UFC, mixed martial arts. When an opponent was on the ground, another opponent was on them, and they were punching them in the face. Every now and then, they would cover their mouth. They'd take their hand, just kind of put it over their mouth, and the announcers would say, he's disrupting his breathing, blah, 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 blah. And I started to realize if you're and you don't get that breath, all of a sudden your body goes like, oh, panic, we're not getting our breath. Jack up our heart rate. That's what we need. Increase our breathing in and out. Dump out all those hormones and all that adrenaline. We need to breathe. And so when we are mouth breathing, it's essentially creating a response to our body that we're under stress, we're under attack. Right? Sometimes that's good, right? If I am fighting off a bear, you best believe I want my body to think I am under stress or under attack. But what happens for us as athletes is it's a very easy way to kind of pre-fatigue ourselves, right? So throughout your day, tomorrow, and for the rest of the week, I want you to think about a situation where you're feeling stressed, right? Maybe it's traffic, maybe it's something just got dumped on you at work, and you're gonna start to feel yourself, shoulders creep up, shallow chest breaths. And what that's doing is starting to dump out some adrenaline. It's starting to dump out some cortisol. And throughout our day, just through our breath alone, we are releasing all these hormones and all these effects on our body that basically fatigue us and add stress to us. So we, as humans, need to be nasal or nose breathers. So nice and calm, nice and relaxed. Someone once told me, think about the nose hairs not moving as you're breathing. We're nice and calm, we're nice and relaxed, okay? So when we are able to breathe out of our nose, that also lets us know that we are in our aerobic system, right? Because we're just functioning all off of oxygen. So if I am trying to elicit just an aerobic response, I'll tell my athletes, do not breathe out of your mouth. Because the moment you do that, it's letting me know your heart rate has gotten to a certain elevation that you can't really easily provide oxygen for, and then we have to go mouth. And that's kind of usually when we get into that almost that glycolytic-ish state, and I don't want that. I just want pure aerobic or cardio, nice and easy, soft and relaxed. Okay? So we have an ability as well to know that if we're going through an intense bout, if we could get back to nose breathing, we're calm and relaxed. As soon as you open your mouth to start to breathe, your heart rate is going to go up. Okay, so if you're assessing your team for conditioning and everyone's huffing and puffing out of their mouth, maybe we need to do some more cardio, so to speak, because we want to see them breathing out of their nose. Now, something that I don't cover well with this is you're not going to breathe out of your nose all the time. But as long as you're not in a stressful, sport-induced situation, we should really be trying to breathe in and out of that nose. Any questions on that? And have I missed anything, Ross? I just want to double check.
Our students know that breath
Yes.
control is very important for
Mm-hmm.
breathing.
Yes.
Because if you're breathing when you're
Absolutely.
taking shots, and it's up.
Yep.
Because we teach them, you can't hold your breath for a long time because then you don't get oxygen to your brain.
Yes.
You can't see, and they have to reject the shot.
Mhm.
So it's all a technique we teach them. But when I see an athlete out there and they're going, because they're trying to relax,
Yeah.
they don't realize when it just blew out like that, they just accelerated their heart rate,
Yeah.
which is going to make them all shaky.
Yes.
So we teach them to breathe through their nose.
Perfect. Good. Yes. Breathe through your nose. You brought up a great point. I'm not doing well teaching the breathing. So when we breathe as well, most people will breathe with their shoulders, even through their nose. Okay, so when you're a chest breather, you're not as good as a stomach breather. So what we want to see is somebody's breath get initiated with their belly button going out first, and then it's like a wave slowly comes up into the chest, and then the chest goes in, and then the stomach goes in. Okay, we don't want to be breathing with our neck or our upper back. One of the reasons we do that is behind our belly button is a muscle known as our diaphragm. It is our breathing muscle. It's what helps create the pressure differences in our lungs, and air goes in and out. But oftentimes, if your hips are dumped forward, your diaphragm isn't working well. So we need to pull our hips to our belly button, stretch out our hip flexors, get our hips right, and then everything else usually works really well. So that diaphragm, if it is not functioning properly, if you can't get your athletes to belly breathe and then slowly come up into the chest, bad things are happening, right? And again, it's just a stress-induced breathing pattern, right? You're going to get tired during sports. right? A high intensity sport, at some point you're going to be going, right? The chest, the shoulders are going to be rising to kind of just help you stay alive. But we don't want that all the time throughout the day. We want to be belly breathers and nose breathers. Good. Yeah, so for you, coach, I would really encourage your team, train to just breathe with that stomach. Because when they're dialed in, we don't want any movement going on up here. So really encourage them, breathe with the belly button. It's a good cue. Too many people will breathe just stomach. We do need some air coming up in that chest, but just things to kind of think about to coach them up on. Anything else on the breathing? Okay, so box breathing. I'm not sure why it's called box breathing, but everybody should have a breathing pattern. So here's what I mean by that. When I breathe in for 6 seconds, hold for 2, breathe out for 6 seconds, hold for 6. And I know that if I can do that, my body, my brain, my nervous system is good to go. I'm dialed in. I know if I could do that, I'm not sick. I know if I could do that, I'm well rested. I know if I could do that, my hormones, my stress levels, everything is just good. If I can't do that, I know something's wrong. Maybe I'm a little bit sick. Maybe I didn't sleep really well last night. However, going through these box breathing patterns and getting back into my breathing pattern, the one that I know I could hit when I'm feeling good, kind of gives me a checkup of where I'm at. So before I'll train athletes and before they walk out the door, before I personally strap up and lift some weights myself, I lay on the ground and I belly breathe and I make sure I can hammer that pattern. So for somebody who hasn't trained their breathing well, maybe you have your team start by breathe in for 3, hold for 2, breathe out for 3, hold for 2. So that breathe in anywhere from 2 to 6 seconds, then we always hold for 2, breathe out 2 to 6 seconds, and then hold your breath after you breathed out for 2 to 6 seconds. So, something in that range. Okay, so here's how it looks for my teams, how it looks for me. I'll lay down. I like to put my back flat on the floor. I pull my hips up to my belly button. I create length between my tailbone and my neck. I encourage hand on the belly button, hand on the chest, because then they could feel, am I pushing into my hand on my belly button or my chest first? Which do I feel rise? And then it's basic. I count out for them, breathe in, 2, 3, hold, 2, breathe out, 2, 3, hold, 2, breathe in, 2. So that's kind of how I start it, but we'll have them breathe in through their stomach, hold for 2, breathe out, and hold. So that box breathing pattern, it's a phenomenal thing to do to keep your athletes calm if they're getting nervous or riled up. It's a phenomenal thing to do to help them get rid of that stress from their school day, get rid of that stress from their relationships, get rid of that stress from they got cut off on the way to practice and they're just a little grumpy and upset about it. Get rid of that stress of that bad grade they just got. And hey, during this time, we're going to focus up. We're going to get ready for what we have coming next. It's very, very powerful stuff, especially if you get a whole team going with it. But the box breathing, it's just a good way to know where am I at. And everybody will have their kind of own breathing pattern that's unique to them. Again, mine is in for 6, hold for 2, out for 6, hold for 6. But like I worked up to that. So I try to encourage my athletes in for 4, hold for 2, out for 4, hold for 4. The box breathing patterns. Am I missing any key parts of that, Ross? Okay. Coach, thank you so much. Hopefully when you walk away today, you could have some things of like, all right, here's 1 or 2 small things I could add right now. Here's 1 or 2 things that I'm going to kind of keep building on. So I just want to really hammer in for Ross. He was being super modest with the stuff that he had with the swim team. Our swim coach, he's phenomenal. I don't want to not give him any credit, but what he and Ross have put together, with Ross really being a great sounding board, it's special. Like that swim program is unreal. It might be an empty promise from now until June, but reach out to us, talk to us. How can we help? Hey, here's kind of how I lay my practice out. What do you think? Right? Just let us be a kind of third-party perspective. I don't know your sport, but here's what I know. Can we work together? And again, like I just really want to say the stuff that Ross talked about, he is very, very good at it. It is some very high-level stuff, and he made it pretty simple, and we could break those things down even further. But any questions? Any questions at all, coaches?
Thank you all. It's very good.
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciate it. So please reach out. Let's meet. I think I'm always trying to figure out what is the best way to work with our teams that aren't with us in the weight room every week throughout an entire year. And I think having a 30, 45-minute meeting every so often just to make sure we're all on the same page and heading towards the same target of winning both in our sport and with our athletes could make a big difference. Ross, feel good? Cool. Well, let me just close this in prayer and we'll head out here. Father God, thank you so much. Thank you first off, Lord, that we get to work here and we get to coach the men and women, these young men and women that you chose to come here. And we are just so grateful for the opportunities and the blessings that you give us. Thank you, Lord, for the people in this room. Thank you for the coaches. Thank you for the students. Thank you for Ross. Thank you, God, that we have a heart for you. And it's been a trying year, Lord. Things have changed. We've had a lot of ups, but we've had a lot of downs as well with just things canceled, this and that. God, may we be encouraged and invigorated as we move on throughout the rest of February and as we approach these other months of just plowing ahead, charging ahead, and please help us to train these champions for Christ. I want to pray that these coaches could take away some things to start to implement now and in the future, Lord, so that we can just do your work and honor and glorify you in everything we do. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much, coaches. Really appreciate it. Thank you. I loved your clock, Ross. That was really good. It didn't make sense until I saw it up there. Yeah, the 0 to 15. Yeah, that was good stuff.
Thank you, Chris.
No, thank you, Coach.
Appreciate it.
It's great to
Good
see
job.
you.
You
Yeah.
too, as
I was
always.
looking at the schedule. Not a lot going on at home these days, huh?
Not a lot going anywhere.
Yeah. Are the guys liking it though? It seems like you're wrestling some good competition.
We are.
Good.
Some very good competition.
Good.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
it's been limited though.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to follow up on all the Ted Allen articles I can and catch up
Yeah.
with Ross, but
No, it's been good.
Good.
It's just trying to motivate them. They've done a great job, but there's no carrot at the end.
yeah, I know. That's tough. So how much longer until it's over? Season's over.
Pretty much, we don't have anything else right now.
No
Now
other
we're
competitions.
going into our spring training. I'm giving a week off and we're going into spring training.
Awesome. Okay. Wow. That's tough.
It is.
Yeah.
It is tough. Hey, coach.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. We'll see you, Coach. Thank you. Oh, thanks, Coach. Oh, we'll do that. Yeah. Coach, appreciate you. Yeah. You're.
Thank you.
We know who you are. Let's just put it that way. When you show up to stuff like this, when you ask the questions what you do, we really appreciate you around here.